Hey everybody, Parker Walbeck here, creator of Full-Time Filmmaker. Thanks for tuning into this free filmmaking training. I'm super excited to have you, and just a quick FYI, this is not live. I've done a bunch of live webinars in the past and realized that when I'm presenting live, I don't get to answer very many of your questions since I'm focusing on my presentation. So this is a recording, that way you still get the same valuable presentation, but I'm on the back end answering all of your questions in the chat box. So use the chat box, let me know where you're from and any questions you have as we go. Now, quick overview of the training. First, I'm going to be answering one of the questions I get asked most, and that is, how did I get started and how did I get to where I am today? Then I'm going to talk about what Full-Time Filmmaker is and why I created it. And then we're going to give you a sneak peek at some of the content inside Full-Time Filmmaker by revealing my top 10 secrets to achieving cinematic shots, my 6 steps to making money, and then if you guys are okay with it, because I'm giving away so much free value in this training, I'm going to be making an exclusive offer at the end for anybody who wants to learn more beyond just this free training. And to close the training, I'm going to be answering a long list of my most frequently asked questions. I've had millions of people watch this webinar, and I've written down the most asked questions, and I will be answering all of them at the end. Now, before we get started, let me answer a few questions up front that I always get asked. The first one is, who is this training for? It's geared more towards beginners and intermediates, but also towards professionals who are struggling landing more clients or sponsorships. Basically, anyone that is looking to improve their video skills or improve their income from their video skills. Question number 2, how long is this training going to be? This training is 1 hour long, and no, I'm not just pitching my product the whole time. I'm sharing a ton of content from the Full-Time Filmmaker course. I've even had people that have watched this webinar tell me that they learned more in the 1 hour training than they did in a full year of film school. So make sure you're ready to take notes because I won't go slow and every minute will be jam-packed with valuable information. So without further ado, let's begin the training. First off, a little bit about me. My name is Parker Welbeck. I'm 28 years old, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and I spent about 3 years working with a YouTuber named Devin Supertramp, where I had the opportunity to travel all over the world creating content for top name brands. Here's a quick look at some of my favorite countries that this job has taken me, and this is probably one of the coolest perks about being in the video and film industry, is it opens up so many opportunities to travel the world and experience new places and new cultures that I otherwise never would have experienced had I not learned the skills that I'm about to teach you in this training. Some of the brands I've worked with during those travels include Ford, Mountain Dew, Champion, Panasonic, Ubisoft, Timex, and many more. On these high-budget productions, I worked as cinematographer, editor, and even director at times. So if you take nothing from this training, at least take away the confidence of knowing that the things I'm teaching you today, if applied, will give you the know-how to produce high-end video content for big-name companies like this. More recently, I branched off and started my own production company, working with some big names like Brody Smith, Sean Johnson, Tony Hawk, and I grew my own YouTube channel to over 200,000 subscribers in just the first year, creating content on my own channel for some big name brands like LG and Canon, and receiving sponsorships from companies like GlideCam, Zune Tech, Westcott, and many more. In a nutshell, I've learned what it takes to create high-quality video and attract high-paying clients, and I'm super excited to share with you my insights right now. So, let's dive in. How did I get started? I always get asked this question because people don't know where to start. All they know is they want to be able to shoot professional videos and potentially make money doing so, but don't know how to break into the industry and aren't sure if going to film school is the right step. So I'm going to be sharing with you my story and the steps I took to get to where I'm at today without going to film school. So let's rewind all the way back to what motivated me to get into filmmaking in the first place. 5 years ago, I had zero filmmaking education, zero experience, and I didn't even own a camera. I was knocking doors, selling DirecTV in the hot weather of Texas, absolutely hating my job. I dreaded waking up every morning and going to work, but I needed the money, and I think that's where a lot of people are in life, especially people who are in college and high school trying to figure out how to get by financially while also trying to figure out what you really want to do for a career. And one night after a long day of knocking doors, I came across a quote by Steve Jobs that completely inspired me and changed my life. It reads, "Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work, and the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle." Now, I was currently settling for a job that I didn't love, so I made the commitment right then and there that I wasn't going to do for a job something that I hated just to make money. So I quit my job the next day, drove 17 hours back to Utah, and started searching for my real passion. That's when I came across a video on YouTube by a guy named Devin Supertramp, and I immediately fell in love with his style. He had these perfectly smooth shots and vibrant colors and moving music, and everything just combined to completely inspire me. And I thought to myself, this is it. This is exactly what I want to do with my life. So I dove in headfirst and spent my life savings on buying my first camera setup, a used T3i, a Tokina 11 to 16mm lens, and a Glidecam HD 2000, totaling $1,300, which for me at the time was a lot of money. But this is the principle that I live by that has been a huge part of my success, and that is be willing to take risks and invest in yourself. And we'll talk about this more later on, but you need to be willing to invest in professional gear if you want to be treated as a professional. But as soon as my fancy new gear arrived, I realized I had no idea how to use it, and so I spent the rest of that summer watching frustrating YouTube tutorials trying to teach myself how to do everything. I'm sure a lot of you have been in the same scenario where you spend an hour looking for a tutorial, finally find one that looks promising, but it's 20 minutes long and you're lucky if you get 30 seconds of useful information out of it. Huge waste of time. I know how it goes, and that's a huge reason why I created Full-Time Filmmaker, is because I wanted to give people an alternative to traditional film school, which could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life, and an alternative to spending months and years of your life watching YouTube tutorials and learning from your own mistakes. And we'll talk more about this later, but the point is, I've been where you guys are. I know how frustrating that process can be. But after 3 or 4 months of tutorial watching and learning by trial and error, I took my limited knowledge down to SUU, where I was attending school at the time, and that's where I had my first opportunity to create a name for myself. The first event of the school year was this awesome paint dance, and while dancing with my friends, I noticed that nobody was filming the event, and immediately recognized this as an opportunity to pose myself as the professional filmmaker on campus. So I ran back to my car, grabbed my camera, jumped over the fence, and hopped onto stage and just pretended like I knew what I was doing and like I was the one that was hired to film the event. And this is a huge principle to my success. Be confident. Be confident in yourself and take opportunities when they present themselves, because that's the only way to grow and get better. And I often refer to this principle as fake it till you make it. And that's exactly what I did. I winged it. I started directing the students and the DJ, telling them exactly what to do, and pretty soon everybody thought that I was the filmmaker that had been hired by the school to film the event. I then took that footage home, pulled an all-nighter editing together a video, posted it on YouTube the next day, and everybody started sharing it like crazy. Everybody loved the video, including the administration, who saw the video, pulled me into their office and said, "We love this video you just made, and we'd like to offer you a scholarship to film the rest of our events for the rest of the year." And I was like, yeah, of course I'll take a scholarship. And just like that, I went from not knowing anything about filmmaking to becoming the director of cinematography at Southern Utah University. And all of a sudden I was the big wig on campus, filming all the events, creating all the video content for the university, and it was all thanks to me having the confidence to fake it for one night until I made it. And within a couple of months, I was able to make a return on my initial investment by landing a full scholarship and landing other paying gigs around campus. But I didn't stop there. Another huge key to my success is continue learning and growing. So instead of being content with my newfound success, I pushed myself to the next level by upgrading to an even nicer camera setup with the Canon 5D Mark III, the 16 to 35mm lens, and the 70 to 200, and of course my trusty Glidecam, bringing my total to $6,500. Only problem is I didn't have the money. So I went to my dad and said, "Dad, I'm a poor college student, but I believe this could really take off, and I need $6,000 to be able to take my business to the next level." And my dad told me later on that he really didn't think I'd make much of it, but he at least believed in me as a person and that I would at least give it my best shot. So he gave me the money, I bought the gear, and this new setup was a huge key to being able to take my next opportunity. About a month after buying my new gear, I saw a Facebook post by Devin Supertramp saying that he did a shoot in Hawaii, some of the shots didn't work out, and he needed somebody in Utah that had the same looking arms as his actor in Hawaii. So I sent him a picture of my arms on Facebook and said, "How do these look?" And he immediately responded back and said, "Perfect, can you be in Provo tomorrow?" And I was completely starstruck that he was even responding to me, and I said, "Yes, of course, I'll be there." So I spent the rest of that weekend doubling as Devin's arm model for his Far Cry 3 video, if any of you have seen that on YouTube. I'm the one shooting people in the back with my beautiful arms. But while I was on set with him, I started picking picking his brain and said, Devin, who's helping you film all of your videos and doing all of your behind the scenes and helping you edit all of your weekly videos? And he said, you know what? I'm actually looking for somebody right now. I've been doing all of this by myself up until now. And so I sent him some of my work and said, look, I don't have the most experience, but I can promise you that I'll be more passionate and hardworking than anybody else you can find. And here's where my new camera gear came into the equation. He asked, well, what camera do you shoot with? And for me to be able to say, oh, I own the exact same gear you do, I think gave him a lot of confidence to give me a shot because, hey, how bad could I be if I was shooting with the exact same gear as him? So a week later, he called me up to film a behind the scenes project, and the rest is history. That is how I started my career with Devin Supertramp. But it wasn't all that easy. I spent my first couple months working for him for free just to add value to his business, and that's another principle that I live by, is add value first. I was willing to work for free for a few months just to show him how much value I could bring to his business, and once he saw the value I brought, he didn't want to live without me, so he hired me on full time and returned the value right back. So with this new job, I was also able to pay back my dad and was able to start making a living traveling the world doing what I loved. And people always ask me, well, if you had this amazing job traveling the world with your personal hero, then why would you ever leave Team Supertramp? My answer, same reason that I got the job in the first place, because I'm not content in life unless I'm continually learning and growing. And after 3 years at Devin Supertramp, I had stopped growing. I was going through the same routines, doing the same work, and there just wasn't a lot of room for me to grow anymore in his company. So I broke off, started my own production company and YouTube channel, which led me to also eventually create Full-Time Filmmaker. Because what happened was my following on Instagram and Facebook were constantly asking me questions, wanting to know how to break into this industry. So one day I sent out a post asking all of my followers, what do you want to learn from me? And I got about 200 questions back and then took every single question and I organized them chronologically from beginning to end, everything one would need to know about how to become a professional filmmaker, even if they were a complete beginner. And then I took all those questions, scripted over 100 pages of organized answers, researching and making sure I was answering all of these questions correctly and concisely, and then took that 100-page script of answers and spent the next 6 months filming and editing training videos into what is now Full-Time Filmmaker. Over 100 organized training videos taking you from beginning to end, from what equipment to buy and how to use it, how to get cinematic shots, my full editing workflow in both Premiere and Final Cut Pro X, all the way to landing and keeping clients and starting your own business. Currently over 20 hours of video content, and it's growing every week as I'm always adding more to it and keeping the learning relevant and up to date. So that's just a quick look at how Full-Time Filmmaker came about, and we'll talk more about the full program at the end. But what I want to do right now is dive into some of the content inside the program and give you as much free training as I can in our time remaining. So let's now talk about my top 10 secrets to achieving cinematic shots. Number 1 is buying the right gear. People always ask me, what camera should I buy? And this is kind of a loaded question because it completely depends on what you're going to shoot and what your budget is. But I'm going to give you my top camera recommendations in different price ranges and which cameras specialize in what. First budget range, $0. If you don't have any money to invest in gear, then just use your phone. Most smartphones have great cameras nowadays, so you can get started creating content by just using the camera already in your pocket. If you don't believe me, check out my iPhone versus Red or LG V30 versus Red videos on YouTube, where I show that phones can achieve similar results to that of a $50,000 cinema camera. If you do use your phone though, make sure to use a manual camera app. I recommend Filmic Pro, which you can pick up for about $10. That allows you to manually control your image for best results. Also, to get smooth shots, I recommend using a stabilizer. The Zhiyun Smooth Q and the DJI Osmo Mobile 2 are both great options for around $130. Moving into our next price range, for just $600, you can get a beginner DSLR and kit lens, and the best beginner camera I'd recommend is the Canon SL2. To learn all the reasons why I recommend this one, you can watch my full review of this camera on my YouTube channel, where I shot a short film using just this camera handheld, proving that you can get great results with cheap gear if you learn some skills to back it up. Now, there's other great beginner options out there as well, like the Panasonic G7, but I personally like Canon cameras for their amazing in-camera colors, their superior autofocus, and their great lens options. But every manufacturer is going to have pros and cons, and we talk more in depth about those pros and cons in the course. Next budget range, if you have around $1,000, then I'd say look into getting a nicer lens and a stabilizer for your DSLR. Lenses are just as important as the camera bodies, and depending on what you shoot, I'd recommend either getting a wide-angle lens like a Dokina 11-16 for crop sensor cameras, a Canon 50mm prime 1.8, or a standard lens like the Sigma 17-50. And we'll talk more about lenses and focal lengths later on. As for stabilizers, I personally love and recommend the GlideCam HD2000, probably the best investment I've made as it helps my film stand out from so many others by incorporating cinematic movement, and we'll talk about how to utilize this tool later on as well. There's also a lot of motorized gimbal options available out there that are similarly priced to the GlideCam, and you can check out my comparison of the GlideCam versus a motorized gimbal and the pros and cons of each on my YouTube channel as well. Moving into our next price range, for around $1,000 just for the camera body, I recommend getting a Panasonic GH4, Canon 80D, or the Sony a6300. Each great for different reasons like the sensor size, resolution, frame rates, and again we talk in depth in the course about all the different things to look for when buying a camera. And for around $2,000, I'd say the two most popular choices are the Panasonic GH5 and the Sony a7 III. These are probably your best bang for buck options for quality cinematography cameras for the price. For around $3,000, I'd say your best options are the Sony a7S II, which is amazing in low light for shooting events like weddings, or the Canon 5D Mark IV. Both of these cameras are full-frame sensors, which gives you more shallow depth of field compared to smaller sensor cameras like the GH5. Jumping up to $5,000, the Canon 1DX Mark II shoots 4K at 60 frames per second and has the most amazing in-video autofocus tracking system on the market. So yes, this is super pricey, but in my opinion, this is the best DSLR for cinematography on the market, but obviously you're going to pay a premium for that. Now, if you've outgrown the DSLR world and are looking to get into higher-end cinema-grade cameras, a couple good options would be the Blackmagic Ursa Mini, the Panasonic EVA-1, and the Canon C200, all sitting around $7,000. Again, each of these with their own pros and cons. If money's just not an issue for you and you want a top-notch cinematic image, RED cameras are the most popular choice. I personally own the Red Weapon 6K camera. They now make 8K cameras, however, that is going to cost you anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000. These cameras specialize in high resolutions, high frame rates, high dynamic range, and they shoot in RAW, which gives you a lot of color grading latitude in post. And a few popular Hollywood movies that have been shot on the RED would be Guardians of the Galaxy, Pirates of the Caribbean, and many more. But they're starting to make some cheaper options like the Red Raven that you can get for $6,000 body only, and the Scarlet W that you can get for $10,000 body only. Keep in mind though, throughout all these camera recommendations, that it's not the camera that makes the most difference, but rather the skills and creativity behind the camera. So I always tell people it's pointless to buy expensive cameras if you have no idea how to use them. And that's why I put Full-Time Filmmaker together, to teach people the skills they need to know how to take advantage of the gear they already have instead of spending thousands of dollars on better gear in hopes that it's going to all of a sudden make their videos look more professional. There's so many skills that need to be learned to achieve the cinematic look regardless of the camera you have, and that leads us to cinematic secret number 2, which is choosing the right settings. Here's some of the settings I recommend to achieve the cinematic look. First and foremost is to shoot at 24 frames per second. Trust me people, this is what they shoot Hollywood films at, and is what your eye is used to seeing when it comes to high quality films. The reason is because it gives a certain motion blur that is easy on the eyes and makes it feel more like a movie. A lot of people start out at 30 frames because it looks smoother, but when you shoot at 30 frames per second, it's going to make it look more like a soap opera or a news broadcast, because they shoot everything at 30 frames per second to make it feel more like real life and less like a movie. There are times though that I do shoot higher frame rates, and those times are when I plan on slowing it down to 24 frames in post. For example, if I shot 60 frames, I would convert that to 24 frames in the editing room, and that's what creates slow motion. Other camera settings, picture profile. As far as what I used with Devon Supertramp for 90% of the videos we shot, this is the picture profile we used. A standard profile with sharpness turned all the way down to 0, your contrast turned down 1, saturation up 1, and color tone up 1. And these settings will give you a super vibrant, saturated, happy look to the films, and that's what we were going for with all of the Devon films that we shot. So if you want to replicate that same style, that is probably the profile you want to use. Now, your camera comes with a bunch of presets, so you can play around with those and figure out which looks best to you. A lot of people will shoot CineStyle or a flat profile, which means it's a super unsaturated and non-contrasty look, which will help you retain more dynamic range and overall detail, giving you more control over your image to color grade in post. And we'll talk about color grading a little bit later. But if you're new to color grading and or don't want to spend a lot of time in post, I recommend using a profile that looks good straight out of camera like the one I showed you. Next setting is white balance. I highly discourage shooting anything auto in camera. Learn how to use your manual settings. Here's an example of me shooting with auto white balance. Every light source has a color temperature, and the temperature of the sun during a sunrise like this image is around 3000 Kelvin. But when you use auto white balance, it's going to make your sun look white, which will make everything else look blue. So what you have to do is go to your manual settings and change your white balance to around 6000 Kelvin, and all of a sudden it warms everything up and makes it look like a true sunset. So as a rule of thumb, when you're shooting outdoors with direct sunlight, I'd recommend shooting between 56 and 6000 Kelvin, and if you're indoors using only artificial lighting, you usually want to be between 3 and 4000 Kelvin. Another auto setting to avoid is auto ISO. Here you see 3 photos, each with a different exposure. Oftentimes, if you use auto ISO, it will either expose for the sky and underexpose your subject, or it will expose for the darkest part of your image and overexpose the sky. But if you manually expose, you can choose your exact exposure and choose something in the middle. And when choosing your exposure, use your histogram, which is this graph that reads the exposure of your image and tells you whether it's underexposed, which will put all the information over here to the left, or whether it's overexposed, which will put all of your information over here to the right. You want all of your image information to sit somewhere in the middle and is spread out evenly throughout your histogram rather than bunched up to one of the sides. So learn how to use these tools within your camera to get correct exposure and avoid using those auto settings. Cinematic secret number 3 is getting smooth shots. People always ask how I achieve such smooth shots with my glide cam, so I'm going to touch on my 4 keys to getting smooth shots. Key number 1 is getting good balance. There are 3 points of balance with your glide cam. The first is your left to right, the second is your front to back, and the last one is your top to bottom. And this is the one that people struggle with the most. The way you get a correct top to bottom balance is by having a drop time between 2 and 3 seconds. The drop time is the amount of time it takes for your glide cam to go from horizontally to vertically. And I personally prefer keeping the drop time around 2 seconds, and this will ensure that your glide cam doesn't sway back and forth as you walk. Key number 2 is the offhand. This is probably the biggest key next to your balance. You'll notice that I'm holding the glide cam with my left hand even though I'm right-handed. I personally recommend holding up the glide cam with your least coordinated hand and finessing or steering the glide cam with your best hand. Notice how my right hand has 3 or 4 fingers out front and my thumb behind, and I'm barely touching the shaft. Less is more with glide camming. The less you have to steer with that offhand, the smoother your shots will look. And learning to use your offhand is like riding a bike. It will take a few weeks or even months, but once you get it down, it becomes second nature. So don't get discouraged or frustrated, it just takes diligent practice. Key number 3 is using the right lens. For starters, I recommend using wide-angle lenses. This will give you a wider field of view, making it less apparent when there is camera shake. I personally will glide cam with focal lengths as high as 100mm, but that's because I've practiced thousands of hours. So work your way up to tighter focal lengths as you improve, but again, it is easier to achieve smooth shots starting out with wider angle lenses. And key number 4 is the way that you walk. Pretend like you're carrying a hot cup of coffee across the room and bend your knees like shocks to absorb your footsteps. Yes, this will make your legs tired after a long day of glide camming, but it's so worth those steady shots. So there you have my 4 keys to smooth shots. I do go further in depth in the program, but that should at least give you a good idea of where to start and what to focus on. Now, if you're using a motorized gimbal, the motor acts as your offhand, so it takes away the need for key number 2. But the other 3 keys still apply using a motorized gimbal as well, so it's important to learn and apply these tips. Cinematic secret number 4 is create movements. I think movement is the biggest thing that separates my films from so many others, is my ability to move the camera in a way that immerses the audience into the story. So without further ado, here's a 3-minute video I put together that covers my top 10 glide cam moves. Here we go. So the first and most common shot that I use is called the push-in shot. This is literally me just moving straight forward, and I like to use this shot a lot of times for establishing shots, for landscape shots, for real estate shots. This is just a great way to establish a location and an amazing alternative to just using a static tripod shot. The second shot is the pull out. It's the exact opposite of the push in. I'm literally just moving straight back, and I like to use this shot a lot of times when I'm trying to reveal something in my image, like in this instant, these pillars. Or in this case, I'm walking backwards to track these bikers and reveal the landscapes that they're biking on as they reach them. Move number 3 is the parallax, and this one's probably my favorite and the most used. And essentially what I'm doing is I'll move my body one direction while panning the camera in the opposite direction. And this makes it look like your subject stays in the same spot in the frame while everything else around them is moving in the background. So it gives a really cool parallaxing effect. And I love to use this to create movement while still focusing in on my subject. Move number 4 is the rise up, and this is me just going straight up, and I'm mimicking the move that a jib would make. And here's a couple examples of me using the rise up. Move number 5 is the reveal, and that's when I find something in my foreground to reveal something else in my background. And here's a couple examples of using the reveal move. This one obviously done with a drone. Move number 6 is the tilt down. This is where there's something interesting above me and I'll use it to glide up against to reveal something else that's below me. So for example, in this shot I'm using the windmills to reveal the cars that are coming into my scene. And in this one I'm using the buildings to glide up against as I reveal this person walking. Move number 6 is the opposite. This is the tilt up, and I like to use this for intro shots to establish locations in a video or to reveal a character to open up a scene. Again, if you watch any of my videos, you'll notice a lot of these moves being used quite a bit. In this case, I'm tilting up and panning left at the same time, so doing a combination of two. Number 7 is change of focus. This is where I set a focus point close to my subject, and then I'll start farther away where my subject is out of focus, and I'll move into focus. So this is a cool effect, taking your subject from out of focus to into focus, and here's a couple examples of times when I use the change of focus. Number 8 is tracking. You can do lead tracking, follow tracking, side tracking. This is basically when you're trying to keep your subject in the same spot of the frame. And here's a couple examples of me lead tracking, an example of me side tracking, and then an example of me follow tracking. Number 9 is transition moves. This is where I use two different objects from two different scenes, like the tree and the end of this bridge, and then I mesh the two shots together, creating a cool transition, making it seem like I went from one place to another by using something in my frame. So take this for example, this pole that I passed by, I use it to transition into a new clip. And I explain how I accomplish these transitions in my editing workflow videos. And number 10 is low mode. This is where I turn the camera upside down, silhouette my subjects up against the sky, and give you a new, fresh perspective. So instead of silhouetting my subject against the ground like a drone shot would do, I flip that camera upside down, get close up in the action, and give you a new perspective, silhouetting that subject up against the sky. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 glide cam moves. Again, these also apply to using a motorized gimbal. So if you can learn and apply these creative moves, it's going to add a lot of emotion to your films. Moving on to cinematic secret number 5 is create depth. People often ask, what aperture do I shoot at? I personally like shooting at a 2.8 or lower for most things. And the reason being, when you use a low aperture, it knocks the background out of focus and gives you a shallow depth of field, which helps the viewer focus better on the subject. Take a look at this side-by-side example. There's people in the background of both of these shots, but you can't tell in the shot on the left because the background is out of focus. Also, the shot on the left looks a lot more cinematic because that shallow depth of field is creating layers and depth to the image. Depth can also be created using foreground. So anytime I'm glide camming, I'm always looking for some foreground to glide up against to make my image feel more three-dimensional. So look at this shot here. I have foreground on my right, I have my subject in the middle, and background blurred out. So these three layers help create depth to my image. One other tip for creating depth is to look for leading lines. Find natural lines around you like bridges or fences or anything that you can find that helps lead your eye to the center of the image. This is going to help create depth and make your shots look more cinematic. Cinematic secret number 6 is camera angles. People often ask, what camera angles should they cover? Now there are 5 basic camera angles that they'll teach you in film school. Number 1 is the wide angle, which is usually your establishing shot. 2 is a long full body, which is kind of like a wide shot, but is usually on a tighter focal length that covers from head to toe of your subject. Number 3 is the medium shot, which is just the waist up. 4 is the tight or close-up shot, which is usually just the face. And 5 is the detailed or extreme close-up shot, which focuses in on a specific detail. And then of course you can mix up those angles by doing low angles to show more power and dominance, or high angles to show vulnerability and weakness. And I like to live by something I call the 5-shot rule. When I'm covering an important piece of action, I like to cover 5 different angles. So here's an example of a video I shot for Devon Supertramp. The first angle was a wide shot establishing the location. The second shot was from the front of the kayak using a GoPro. The third shot was from on top of a bridge to give a different perspective. The fourth shot was on the side right in the action, and number 5 was using another GoPro from behind the kayak. So there I've covered 5 different angles, and then in the editing room I have the freedom and capability to cut between those different angles to give the viewer a much more dynamic viewing experience because of all the different perspectives. Now, I have another video prepared for you that's going to show you a scene that I shot from one boring angle and then shot it again from 6 different angles and then cut between them to show you how much more life it adds to your story when you use multiple camera angles. So here is our second video showing camera angles.
You can't define it. You can't destroy it. It makes your nerves look like steel. It's in your heart. It makes time stand still. It's where legends are born in the final seconds of the game. Boomtown.
So there you have it. That shows the importance of using camera angles. And just FYI, I didn't have multiple cameras. I just reshot the same scene over and over again from a bunch of different angles and then worked my magic in the editing room to piece it together. You'll also notice that in the editing process, I added sound effects, cinematic music, a voiceover, slow motion, color grading, aspect ratio. So there's a lot of things that went into making that more cinematic, and I cover all of those topics in the full program, but camera angles were a big part of making that more cinematic. Cinematic secret number 7 is perspective or lens choice. Which lens should I use and when? Now, this is one that took me years to understand, and honestly, I was just guessing for a long time. So I'm now going to share with you the lenses I like to use and when. First and foremost is my favorite lens, the wide-angle lens. I like to use my 16-35 when I'm shooting things like landscapes because the wide field of view allows me to see more of my surrounding scenery, or when I'm shooting real estate, it makes the house look bigger, or when I'm shooting action sports type stuff and I want to get really close to the action while still being able to see my full subject in the frame. But times that I don't use 16mm is when I'm doing close-ups of the human face. As you can see, it distorts all the facial features and isn't very flattering. And it's been said that between 70 and 100mm is the most flattering focal length for the human face. So when I'm shooting something like a wedding or portraits, I always pop on my standard lens, the 24-70mm, and this allows me to zoom into 70mm when I'm shooting tight shots of faces, but I still have the flexibility to get pretty wide by zooming out to 24mm to get that wide group shot of the entire family. So your 24-70 is probably going to be your most versatile all-purpose lens. My next favorite lens is my 70-200 telephoto lens. And the times when I use this guy is when I can't physically get any closer to my subject. Like on this one, I was about 200 yards away on a bridge and I just zoomed all the way into 200 so that I could still fill the frame with my subject. Or when I just want to get super tight compressed shots. Now, as far as prime lenses go, I use Sigma Arts, and I currently own a 20, 50, and 85mm, and I use these prime lenses when I'm shooting low light situations or when I have more setup time and can plan out individual shots, since prime lenses will give you a sharper, cleaner image. But a lot of times I need the versatility of zoom lenses, so those are my favorite lenses to use and the times I like to use them. Cinematic secret number 8 is keep focus. Everything could be perfect about your shot, but if you're out of focus, it's not usable. So one of my biggest questions I get is, how do I keep my subjects in focus while I'm moving? Now, I have a free tutorial on my YouTube channel covering this in depth, but here are my 4 main tips for staying in focus. Number 1 is get a camera with really good autofocus tracking like Canon's dual pixel autofocus. I use my autofocus a lot, especially for things like interviews or weddings or anything where I have predictable moving subjects. Number 2, for manual focus, I'll set my focus, then maintain the same distance from my subject throughout the whole shot. Number 3, for more of a handheld look, I will just hold the shaft of my glide cam and change focus as I move closer and farther away from my subject. Or if you use something like a Crane 2, it has a focus wheel that allows you to rack focus manually as you move. And tip number 4 is to use a high aperture, like between 16 and 22, so that everything is in focus. Cinematic secret number 9 is polarizers. People always ask which filters I use and how do I get more dynamic range in my image. My answer is polarizers. I rarely use ND filters. I much rather prefer using polarizers, and this is why. Check out this example of me rotating my polarizer on and off. When the polarizer is on, you notice that the blue sky becomes much more vibrant in the sky, and this in turn makes the clouds pop out from the sky. Also, look at the mountains and the grass. Without the polarizer, they look hazy from the reflection of the sun, but the polarizer cuts through the sun's reflections, making all of your colors look more vibrant. So this gives you the appearance of better dynamic range as it softens those highlights from the sun reflection. So when shooting outdoors, I always try and use my polarizer, and the polarizer I use is the B&W Kaisamon circular polarizer, which is about $140 depending on the size of your lens. Cinematic secret number 10 is lighting. People always ask my techniques for getting the most out of just using natural light. So I'm going to give you my 3 factors that I look for that affect natural lighting. Number 1 is the time of day. Best time of day to shoot, for those of you who don't know, is golden hour. This is the first hour of light in the morning and the last hour of light at night. When the sun is low in the sky, it creates a more flattering, beautiful light, versus if you shoot at noonday when the sun is directly overhead, it's much less flattering and the colors outside are less saturated, so I always try and schedule my shoots around golden hour. Another reason for shooting at golden hour is it allows you to use the sun as backlight, which is number 2, camera direction. Now personally, I love shooting into the sun because when you use the sun as your backlight, it gives you those beautiful sun flares coming in and out of your image, which is a super popular cinematic look. Using the sun as backlight also creates even light on your subject's faces, versus having your subject's faces being lit directly by the sun. In this example, the subjects on the left have raccoon eyes because the sun is directly overhead and in front of them. You can see all these harsh shadows on the face and they're squinting because the sun's in their eyes, versus on the right, their eyes are wide open and there's no squinting and no harsh shadows on the face, just nice even light. So I highly recommend, especially when shooting people's faces, to place the sun behind them. Now there are times when I like using the sun as a front light source. Here's an example of shooting a landscape on a cloudy day and then that same shot but with the scene being front lit by the sun. Look how much more color it adds to have the sun out. So when I'm doing landscapes, I like it to be super sunny. And in this case, that meant I had to wait around for a half hour for the weather to change to get a better shot. Which brings me to my 3rd factor that affects natural light, and that is weather. If you can, try and wait for the sun to come out because it's going to help your images pop more, but if it is cloudy, it's not always a bad thing. Don't just put your camera away and wait for the sun to come out. There are certain things that actually look better with clouds. For instance, shooting weddings or people's faces are great on cloudy days because the clouds actually act as a giant diffuser which softens the light and creates a more flattering look on people's faces. So figure out how to utilize different weather patterns to your advantage. If it's rainy or snowy, some people would put their cameras away, but me, that's the best time to get epic slow motion shots because you have the rain or snow creating movements, so when you slow it down, it looks super epic. So there you have it. Those are my 3 factors that affect natural lighting. Again, I cover this more in depth in the course, and I also cover my techniques for using artificial lights to shape light and create cinematic lighting patterns like the Rembrandt lighting pattern that is one of the most popular lighting patterns used in Hollywood films. By knowing where to place your lights or your subject in relation to those lights, you can create shadows that shape your subject in a cinematic 3-dimensional way, helping create depth to your image. So there you have it. Those are my 10 secrets to achieving cinematic shots, and I'm actually going to throw in one more bonus secret, and that is editing. A lot of people don't realize that half of the cinematicness of my videos happens in the editing room, and the editing software I use is Adobe Premiere Pro, and Adobe actually uses my footage that I shot in Guatemala as their demo footage when you first open up the app, which is kind of cool. But in the course, I actually teach from both Premiere and Final Cut Pro X, so it doesn't matter which one you use, the course teaches both. But I'm now going to give you a few editing tips. Obviously, I can't even scratch the surface of everything there is to learn in just a few minutes, but I want to give you some of my big things to look for. The first editing tip is that audio is equally important to the video. Do not neglect audio. I can't harp on this enough. That's one of the biggest telltale signs of an amateur film is if the audio sounds terrible. So make sure you get close enough to your subject when you're recording audio to ensure that you capture quality sound, and also make sure to sound design. This means you're adding sounds on top of what you recorded that will help everything come to life. For instance, I shot this landscape clip and I didn't get a very good soundbite, so I have some stock sounds that I use, like an ambient noise of some birds chirping and the ocean waves crashing. So throw in as many layers of sound as you can to help your viewers feel like they're actually there. And I actually include some of these sound effects in the program to help my students start building a library of sound effects, and I provide a link where you can download a huge library of sound effects for free. Another big part of audio is choosing the right music. Here's my 4 go-to music licensing websites: PremiumBeat.com, Audio Jungle, Soundstripe, and Artlist. I don't use MusicBed very much because they're super overpriced, and I actually worked out a deal with Soundstripe to give 20% off their service, so full-time filmmaker members get unlimited music licensing for around $100 a year. I also worked out a deal with Artlist so that full-time filmmaker members get their first 2 months for free. So there you have it. Those are some great options for cinematic music, and I'll often spend hours, sometimes days, searching for the right piece of music. So be patient with it and find the right music that helps tell your story best. Also, a lot of the music I use are independent artists that I've found myself, and here's a list of some of those artists that I have used over the years, and I actually include 40 free songs from some of these artists in the course as well. Editing tip number 2 is color correction and color grading. Real quick, I just want to give you my very basic color correcting process. Within Premiere Pro, I use an effect called Lumetri Color, and within Lumetri Color, the first thing I'll do is adjust my white balance using the temperature and tint. Next, I'll adjust the exposure if needed, add some contrast if needed, add some saturation, and lastly, I'll go to my RGB curve and create an S curve, which means I bring my highlights up and my shadows down, creating an S, which creates contrast and helps my image pop. So that's my basic color correction process. Color grading, on the other hand, is when you give your footage a very specific look or feel, and within the Creative tab of Lumetri Color, you have the option to add LUTs or lookup tables, which are basically color grading presets, and you can then choose a look that fits your story. One of the most popular color grades out there is the orange and teal look, or the blockbuster look. Many on YouTube are calling it the Sam Colder look, and I actually provide 2 of my favorite orange and teal LUTs that I use for free in the course, and links to where you can download other awesome free LUTs as well. And for you Final Cut Pro X users, all these same tools can be found in Final Cut Pro X, and I teach that full workflow from both softwares. So there you have it. Those are my top secrets to achieving cinematic shots, but knowing them isn't enough. You got to get out and actually practice these to learn them. Practice makes perfect. Now, real quick, I want to shift gears and talk about how to actually make money once you've learned these skills. First, let's talk about the industry of filmmaking and video production. About 10 years ago, the only way to make high quality video was by having super huge expensive cameras with huge expensive lights and dollies and jibs and a 50-man crew to make everything work properly. But something happened about 10 years ago that I call the video revolution. In 2005, YouTube came out and became the largest video streaming platform that instantly connected the world through video. And then in 2008, DSLR video was introduced by cameras like the Canon 5D Mark II, which suddenly made it very affordable and accessible to achieve movie-like footage. And this was shortly followed by drones and glide cams and 3-axis gimbals, all of which are rapidly changing the face of filmmaking. Now, for a few $1,000s and a one-man crew, I can get similar looking shots to that of a huge 50-man crew and $1 million budget. And this accessibility and affordability has sparked the digital video industry and has exploded the amount of brands and businesses that use YouTube and online digital video to promote and sell their products. From 2006 to 2012, you can see the difference in amount of online digital video that has been created by top brands in the world. And from 2013 to 2015, the amount of money being spent on digital video has doubled from a $2.8 billion industry to a $5 billion industry. And just in 2016 alone, it almost doubled again, hitting over $9 billion. So what I'm getting at is that the demand for digital video is higher than ever. There are millions of businesses around the world creating videos, and somebody has to create those videos. And that's where you and I come in. And the coolest part about this job is it's so diverse. There's so many different types of industries that require high quality video production. And here's just a few industries that I've personally stepped into that have all been big money makers for me. High-end luxury real estate videos, wedding videos, events like paint fights or lantern festivals, music videos, action sports videos like Devon Supertramp style, corporate videos, travel and tourism videos, shooting for stock footage companies, documentaries, independent films, and many more. With so much versatility in this job, I feel like there's never a shortage of business, and I never get bored because I'm always shooting different styles of videos each month. Or if you want to specialize in just one field, I personally know wedding videographers who make 6 figures a year just shooting weddings. So what I'm getting at is that there's never been a better time to get into filmmaking. Please don't give up your dreams because you feel like you're too late in the game and the market is already too oversaturated with other filmmakers. There is plenty of work to go around for everybody, and a lot of my students are proving that as I've helped them grow their businesses. Just last year, one of our members started the course and within 3 months quit his day job because he was making twice as much shooting wedding videos and small business commercials. So if he can do it, so can you. Which brings me to my next question I want to answer, and that is, how can I make money making videos? To answer this, we're now going to go over my 6 steps to making money. And again, I can't cover these all in depth in this webinar, but I'll at least give you the steps real quick to give you an idea. Now, we talked a little bit about the first one, invest in yourself. You have to be willing to spend money if you want to make money. Be willing to take risks, maybe even go into debt a little bit. It's kind of like paying for an education. Be willing to invest in your future. I can't emphasize that enough. Number 2 is master your skills. What is going to separate you from other filmmakers out there? No one is going to hire you over someone else if their videos are better than yours. And this is why I created Full-Time Filmmaker, to help people master their video skills so that their work stands out from the crowd. Number 3 is build a portfolio. This is huge. You need to have demo videos that show clients in order for them to trust that you can pull off a certain level of quality. If you show them your work and they still don't hire you, then you probably need to go back to step number 2 and work on mastering your skills. Number 4 is market yourself. Even if you don't feel confident in your skill level yet, you have to put your work out there. Use social media to get eyeballs, because the more eyeballs that watch your videos, the greater your chances are that somebody with a video need will want to hire you. Without fail, every time I post a new video, I get more job offers. So always share your work, and I talk more in depth in the program on how to share videos most effectively to increase total viewership and start building a following. Number 5 is build relationships. A huge part of my success was building a relationship with Devin Supertramp, getting connected to his circle of influence, and a lot of my clients come from the relationships I built while working there. So networking to the right people is a huge part of landing jobs, and we'll talk about our amazing community and network of filmmakers that we've built inside Full-Time Filmmaker in just a second. And lastly, number 6 is add value first. I live by the principle that I like to call free to fee. In other words, be willing to work for free before you charge a fee. I promise you, if you go into a company and say, I want to take your backpack around Southern Utah and make a free commercial for you, of course they're going to say yes. And that's exactly what I did with the company Cotopaxi. And then I sent them the final video and they were like, wow, this content is amazing. We'd like to hire you to go to Hawaii and do the same thing. And I said, awesome, that sounds great. I charge $5,000. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my work, especially starting out, is offering my services for free, adding value first so people can see how much value you bring to their company and wanting you to make more videos. Another awesome example of this is in 2016, I shot an iPhone versus Red video on my own dime, in my own time, posted it to YouTube, and a year later, LG saw it and asked if I could make a similar video for them for their new LG V30 smartphone and gave me a $40,000 budget to do so. But had I not created that free content a year earlier, I never would have drawn the attention of a huge company like LG and landed such a high-paying brand deal. And this free-to-fee method is the same way I got hired to edit several Imagine Dragon music videos, and how I got Canon to recognize me and start sending me free cameras to do paid reviews. So be willing to work for free to build your portfolio. And at this point, I usually get a handful of you saying, oh, you should never work for free because then they'll just expect you to work for free forever. But that, my friends, is the problem with most creative minds. Artists usually aren't the most business savvy people, but business skills can be learned. If you'll learn how to communicate and negotiate and to correctly set prices for your work without undervaluing your services or overvaluing them and losing the job, then you'll be able to make a good living making videos. And again, I go in depth in the course teaching you how to set prices for your work by using a series of questions to ask your clients to ensure that you get paid what you're worth. So there you have my 6 steps to making money, and that is how I've gone from making less than $10,000 in my first year to over 6 figures a year now. And the coolest part is, because I've been able to up my prices over the years, I work far less for the same amount of money. And because I'm not working nearly as many hours and days, it has freed me up to build Full-Time Filmmaker and use my free time to now help others do the same with their businesses. So now I want to dive into Full-Time Filmmaker to give you an idea of what the full program includes for anyone who enjoys my teaching style, has gotten some good value out of this webinar, and would like to learn a whole lot more. Again, this training has only been 1 hour, and the full Full-Time Filmmaker program is over 20 hours of video content just like this, and I'm adding to it every month. So as far as content goes, here's a quick look at the topics I cover. I have a full section dedicated to helping you buy the right gear. I've spent hundreds of hours researching gear to make sure I buy the best bang for my buck, so I go in depth telling you all the things to look for when buying camera bodies, lenses, stabilizers, microphones, lights, computers, softwares, and I even go fully in my bag and show you everything I've ever bought so that you can know not only the things that you should buy, but help you avoid some of the things you shouldn't buy. I also do gear comparisons showing you different products and different price ranges so you can see how the quality compares and know what you'll be getting for your money. So just through these comparisons, I could probably save you thousands of dollars by helping you know which things to avoid buying and some cheaper alternatives to expensive items that will give you a similar result. And one of the best perks of Full-Time Filmmaker is, because there is power in numbers, I am able to get our members awesome discounts on software and gear. For example, everyone who joins the program is eligible for the Adobe Creative Cloud student discount, which gives you 60% off their entire creative suite, saving you $360 a year in editing software costs. So this bonus alone will pay for the cost of joining the course in less than 2 years. But on top of that, you will also get 50% off any Red Giant software like Pluralize or Magic Bullet Looks, which is a great color grading software. Also, members get 10% off refurbished glide cams, 10% off Zhiyun Crane 2s, 10% off Rhino sliders, and 10% off Westcott lights. And we also have some internal contacts to help you get discounts on G Technology hard drives and even some Apple products. And as I mentioned before, members also get 20% off Soundstripe memberships for affordable, unlimited music licensing and 2 free months at Artlist. And I continue to reach out to new companies all the time looking for more discounts for our members. My goal is to help save you more money in gear discounts than you initially spent on joining the program. For example, here was a comment in the Facebook group just the other day from one of our members saying, "The money I've saved through Full-Time Filmmaker has paid more than the cost of the course, not to mention all the great info. Worthwhile investment." So in a nutshell, that is what the equipment section is all about, helping you know what to buy and saving you money along the way. In the next section, I go into all the technical terminology. Even if you are a beginner not knowing a single thing about cameras, I start from the very beginning, showing you how to navigate through your camera, learn how to use your white balance, how to set your picture profile, how to get correct exposure using shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and what effects they each have. Then I go further in depth, teaching you my 4 keys to getting smooth shots on the glide cam and how to balance it perfectly. And then in the creative section, I teach my entire creative process, my 10 rules of composition, the rules I teach you in film school, like the 180-degree rule, how to get cinematic shots on tripods, how to get cinematic shots using drones, how to create emotion and becoming a better storyteller, how to shape light to create cinematic lighting patterns, how to shoot time lapses and hyperlapses from start to finish, the full shooting and editing process. And then I dive into both Premiere and Final Cut Pro X. You can choose or learn both, and I walk you through my full editing workflow from beginning to end on how to manage your data, what hard drives to buy, how to import footage and start a sequence, my process of choosing which footage stays and which footage goes, how to choose music, how to edit to music, how to license music, what effects I use to make my footage more cinematic, like warp stabilizer, time remapping, color grading, aspect ratio, sound designing, fancy transitions like zoom ins and zoom outs, all the way to the export settings I use to ensure high quality exports for my clients. Basically, every step I take in the editing process, I share with you so that you can shorten your learning curve and adopt all my keyboard shortcuts to edit twice as fast and therefore make twice as much money, because time is money. Speaking of money, the last section is all about building your business. I go further in depth talking about my 6 steps to making money, how to create multiple sources of revenue like running a production company, freelancing as a cinematographer or an editor, monetizing YouTube videos, selling stock footage, renting equipment, using affiliate links, and sadly, many filmmakers don't know about these different sources of revenue or how to implement them into their businesses, and it's my goal to help change that. I also go over SEO strategies to help you maximize your audience reach by catering to YouTube and Facebook algorithms so that your content gets pushed to the top of feeds and search results, increasing your views and followers. I even go over my full production process while working on set for a TV commercial, showing you how I operate with a client so that you can feel confident in your ability to produce the same quality content for your clients. In this video, I go over the 5 things I look for as a director and the different roles that need to be filled in a production, and I've recently started a new section called Taught by You, where I put in video tutorials posted by other talented filmmakers in our group that have different skills and different workflows so that you can see not only how I do things and how I've been successful, but how other filmmakers have been successful as well. And then at the end of each section, I provide quizzes that you can take to see if you've missed anything and go back and relearn those concepts you've missed. So that is the content in a nutshell for you. Like I said, I'm always adding new content as I learn new things to keep the learning relevant and up to date. And like I talked about earlier, I credit a lot of my success to the fact that I had Devin Graham as my personal mentor, along with his circle of influence to answer my unique questions. So I'm throwing myself in as your personal mentor, so you'll always have somebody to email or chat with to help answer your questions or review your work and tell you what you need to work on to improve your skills. And even more valuable than my mentoring and my feedback is the mentoring and feedback from our exclusive community on our private Facebook group, where we have thousands of members from dozens of different countries, and our community is growing by about 30 members every week. I also provide a map showing you where everybody lives so you can collaborate with other filmmakers no matter where you are in the world. This Facebook group is also where I do Feedback Fridays, where every couple weeks I'll break down an individual's video, tell them exactly what they need to improve on, and share it with the group so everybody can learn from each other's mistakes. We also hold regular video contests and give out various prizes for the winners. In our latest contest, the winner received a Devin Graham Series Glide Cam, which is valued at $800. So again, if you win one of these contests, that alone pays for the price of joining the course. Also, as another bonus, I allow in-person job shadowers to all of my shoots. I share my shoot schedules on the Facebook group, telling everybody where I'm going to be filming and when, and I invite any members to come out and learn from me on set and see how I operate in person. And for those who can't make it to the in-person job shadows, I always have one of the shadowers film a behind the scenes, and then I post a virtual job shadow so that everybody can benefit from the job shadows. The goal with these is to show how I operate in any given scenario, from music videos to wedding videos, commercials, real estate, low-light events, working with big brands like LG. I give you a wide variety of shoots to learn from so that you can have the confidence to know how to shoot any job that's thrown at you. And as even more bonuses, like I said, I'm throwing in 40 free music tracks and a full list of my top cinematic artists that I use, 20 of my most used slow motion sound effects, 2 free orange and teal LUTs, and even my release waiver form and invoice template to assist you in running your business. So there it is. That is what Full-Time Filmmaker includes. It is a lifetime membership, so there's only one upfront cost, and you will have access to all the current content and all future content for life. And just that alone, just the content existing in the course right now, in the opinion of many of our members, is worth more than a semester at film school, which could cost you upwards of $5,000. Here's an example of one of our members who actually attended film school and the review he left me. Andrew Guilford said, "Your teaching is clear and thorough and advice is dead on. I've been in film school for 2 years using standard industry equipment, Red Dragon, Premiere, giant jibs, huge dolly setups, and you've summed up in 2 years of classes in about 24 videos. So cool." Another member who took the YouTube route before he joined the course said, "I just want to say this course is amazing. I had made a few videos on my iPhone and thought they were all right, but now I see how many mistakes I've made. I was learning from YouTube. I've learned so much in literally a couple of weeks. You don't know what you don't know. Thanks, Parker." And there's literally dozens of other 5-star reviews giving similar responses. In fact, I've only gotten 1 4-star review so far, and the guy was just asking for quizzes, so I added quizzes, and now he's a happy camper. But my favorite responses from my members are those who tell me they've landed great jobs and furthered their businesses because of what I've taught them. And that is what the whole goal of Full-Time Filmmaker is. to help you make a return on your investment. Buying camera gear is not cheap. Education is not cheap. So I want to help save you time and money through your buying process, help you save time learning how to use that gear so that you can start making money faster and earn back what you've spent on all your gear. There's the old adage that if you give a man a fish, you can feed him for a day, but if you teach a man to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. My goal with Full-Time Filmmaker is to help you make a lifetime of income doing something you love because of the things you learned in this program and from this community. And here's one more example of one of many members who is making a return on his investment. Matt Hutchison of Ontario, Canada said, "I have attended film school and spent about 15 grand on my education, and I can honestly say that the information I've learned in this course has proven more valuable to me than anything I've learned in college, not to mention at a fraction of the price. I've returned my investments with this program within a few months of applying what I learned from the course, and now I'm going to be traveling all over Canada and the US with a major record label filming videos. If you're considering this program, do it. You won't be disappointed." So without further ado, we will finally get to the price of the full program. And as promised, I'll be offering an exclusive webinar discount for those who have hung around to the end of this training. So, as valued by our current members, this program is well worth over $5,000. But you won't pay that. I currently have it priced at $1,500. But as an early bird special, while the program is still growing, I'm currently selling it for just $799. And for those who can't afford the upfront cost, I also have a 6 monthly payment plan of $149 as well. But as an even better offer, as a webinar discount only, the first 5 people to join in the next 20 minutes will get an additional 25% off by clicking on the link that I will provide here in just a second. And once you click on that link, it will take you to this custom discount page. Click the Enroll Now button, then choose between the upfront discounted option or the 6-month payment plan, create your account, and check out. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the offer. Like I said, this offer is good for the next 20 minutes only, and here we go. So there's the offer. Again, we only have 5 coupon codes available at this discounted price. It's a first come, first served basis, so if you're thinking about joining, now would be the time to do so. And while that offer is ticking, I will be answering some of the top questions I get asked during these webinars, so feel free to ask your questions in the chat box. I may answer your question via my voice, or I may answer it in the chat box, so pay attention to both. First question, what is the success rate of people who join Full-Time Filmmaker? Now, I recently did a poll in our private Facebook group and found that over 40% of the Full-Time Filmmaker students are working as part or full-time filmmakers, and over 50% said it was too early to tell because they haven't been at it long enough, leaving just 10% who have struggled making money creating video content. So the success rate is pretty high as long as you apply what I teach in the course. And it's funny because my logo of me holding up my camera has become the new symbol for when somebody in the group goes full time. So it's fun seeing all the different poses as people celebrate their full-time filmmakerhood. Next question, why would I buy this course if I could just watch free YouTube tutorials? That is a great question. As we've talked about, the alternative to Full-Time Filmmaker is a traditional film school, or you can sift through YouTube looking for good tutorials. Now, I'm telling you from experience, I personally took the YouTube route, and the biggest problem I faced was, like one of my members stated, you don't know what you don't know. So I'd watch a bunch of tutorials, go shoot some videos, and then after I shoot the video for a client, I'd learn big mistakes I made while shooting, and then go back and search for more tutorials on that topic. And I did this for years, learning through trial and error. And with Full-Time Filmmaker, I've condensed years of learning from YouTube knowledge and years of learning from my own mistakes and packed it all into one chronological course that you can watch in one day. Time is money. And if all this course does is help you land one paying gig, one wedding, one real estate video, one local commercial, then it will pay for itself. And I promise if you apply what I teach, it will do a heck of a lot more than help you land one gig. Next question. If I want to shoot for a company, how do I approach them? Like I said in my 6 steps to making money, offer your services for cheap or free. Make sure you have a demo video to show them what you're capable of. Add value first, build a relationship with them by being a pleasure to work with, and then your work should speak for itself. If they like the content you created, they'll hire you to do more. If they don't, then you need to work on mastering your skills. Next question, do you use GoPros in any way? Yes, I use GoPros a lot of the time for water activities or anything where I want to get POV shots in the action. So yes, GoPros are a great tool to make your audience feel like they are a part of the action. Do you use any third-party video effects in Premiere? Probably the only one I really use is called Neat Video, which is the best software for denoising an image. But even then, I don't use it very much because it takes forever to render. So mostly just all in Premiere or in Final Cut Pro X. What drone do I recommend for big budget productions? For big budgets, I'd say the DJI Inspire 2 is my go-to. For lower budget shoots, I will solo operate the Phantom 4 Pro Plus. And yes, I chose that over the Mavic because it shoots a lot higher quality video. Question about the course: how long do I have to complete it? Like I said, the upfront payment is a one-time payment that covers it for life. That means you will have access to all the current and future content for life. And if you're an iPhone user, you can actually download an app that will allow you to watch all the content from your phone, and you can even download the videos for offline viewing within the app. What are my thoughts on Flycam versus GlideCam? I recently did a YouTube video comparing the Devin Graham GlideCam that costs around $800 to the Red King Flycam that costs around $200, and they're actually pretty comparable. Overall, I do think the GlideCam is the better product and the one I would recommend to professionals, but for those on a tighter budget, the Red King is a great option. And I don't think I'd go much cheaper than $200, as there are a lot of cheap options out there, but they will be harder to keep balance and just won't perform nearly as well. Next question: can you use the private group to buy and sell gear? Yes, we always have members selling old gear and other members getting great deals on used gear. So a great use of the private group for sure. In fact, our members say that the private group is one of their favorite parts of the program because they learn so much from each other, as everyone has different skills and insights to add. I personally even learn a bunch from reading some of the threads, as there are members that are more talented than me in certain areas, so a lot of awesome interactions go on. Next question: GlideCam versus a motorized gimbal like a Ronin or a Zoom crane. My answer in short: different tools for different situations. I personally use my GlideCam most because the GlideCam is more versatile, much easier to travel around with for run and gun shooting, much easier setup and teardown time, doesn't require battery life, has a more natural look and feel. So basically anytime I'm documenting real life, I like the versatility of the GlideCam. I like using my Movi M5 or a Ronin or a Crane 2 when I'm in a fast-moving vehicle or a helicopter because it stands up to wind resistance better. I also like using it better for low-to-the-ground shots, and basically anytime I have more predictable shots, like when I'm shooting a commercial or a real estate video, that's when I like using a motorized gimbal. So again, just pros and cons to each. Here's a big question: how can I get paid to travel the world? Again, follow my 6 steps to making money. As it applies specifically to traveling, you have to find companies that travel. I've done work for Jeunesse, a multi-level marketing company that does company retreats to incentivize their salesmen, and they go on these awesome vacations, and they need somebody to film those trips to attract more people to want to work there. So I've been able to see amazing places around the world, basically just documenting other people's vacations. So either find companies that travel, or start your own company or YouTube channel that travels and attract sponsorships to help pay your way. And again, we talk further in depth about landing sponsorships in the course. Next question: should I go to film school? Now, I personally never went to film school, so I don't have a firm opinion on this, but I actually asked the same question to Devin Graham, who did go to film school, and he said, honestly, the education wasn't the most valuable part, but he said the biggest thing he got out of film school was networking with other filmmakers. So to replicate this benefit with Full-Time Filmmaker, we have our worldwide community of members that has allowed many in the group to team up and work together. So going to a film school really is a personal decision. There are pros and cons to film school, just like anything else. Now, I get a lot of questions about my opinions on specific types of cameras and lenses, like what do you think of this camera or that stabilizer? And you guys, it really just comes down to personal preference, as each manufacturer has its own set of pros and cons. To see a full list of all my gear recommendations, check out kit.com/ParkerWalbeck, where I show all different cameras and lenses and everything to see all of my recommendations in different price ranges. Again, I will note though that the camera you shoot with isn't nearly as important as the creativity and skills behind the camera. So don't get too hung up on which camera you should buy. Focus more on how to get the most out of the camera you already have. Next question: what if I don't use a Canon camera? Will your course still apply? Absolutely. Many of our members shoot with Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, Blackmagic, and other brands of cameras as well. I do teach from a Canon camera, but the teachings apply to any camera manufacturer, just different menus, different buttons. So again, doesn't really matter what camera you're using. What if I don't edit in Premiere Pro? Will your course still apply? Yes, as I mentioned, I teach my full workflow in both Premiere and Final Cut Pro X, and even if you use Sony Vegas or iMovie, it doesn't matter. The teachings and principles apply to any editing software. Next question, does it pain and drain you to use such heavy setups? Yes, actually, when I'm shooting on my Red, it really does wear on me physically. That's why I usually only shoot 5 to 10 days a month because it's super exhausting. But that's also why I charge $1,500 a day, so that I only have to shoot a few days a month to make a good living. And getting your day rate up to $1,500 a day is all about separating yourself from the competition so that people are willing to pay more for your services so that you don't have to shoot as much, so that your body doesn't wear down as much. Next question, what do you use to record audio? I have a full video covering this topic in the course showing you how and when I use each microphone, but the most common microphone I use is the VideoMic Pro for on-camera audio. I use the Sennheiser MKE2 Lav when I'm doing my walk and talk dialogue. I use the Rode NTG3 on a boom for bigger setups like commercials, and I use the Rode NT1 condenser mic for voiceovers or studio sounding audio like what you're hearing right now. So it just depends on the project, will depend on what microphone I use. And again, kit.com/Parker Welbeck to check out all those recommendations. How do I know how much to charge my clients? Now, there are a lot of variables that go into deciding how much to charge a client. In the business section of the course, I go further in depth, but essentially what I do is I have a series of questions I ask the client before giving them a quote. I've had a lot of members email me about pricing out projects, and I actually walk them through the negotiation process to help them price themselves accurately. And they're oftentimes pleasantly surprised to learn how much their clients are willing to pay. Next question, do you have any experience concerning underwater cinematography? I personally don't do a ton of underwater stuff. I'm not a very good swimmer. I did some with Devon Supertramp, and I honestly just use GoPros when doing underwater stuff. I just don't do enough underwater to justify buying a $2,000 underwater housing. And they actually used a GoPro for an underwater shot in The Hobbit because they didn't want to put their Red underwater. So if Hollywood films can use GoPros underwater, so can I. Can you tell us the most important tools that you take with you on every shoot? This just completely depends on the shoot. My most used gear would probably be the 1DX Mark II, my 16-35, my 24-70, a polarizer, my trusty glide cam, and of course a Rode VideoMic Pro for recording audio. Now, depending on the shoot, I'll also bring my Movi, my Crane 2, a tripod, a monopod, LED lights, lav mics, etc. So just kind of depends on the shoot, but really those are the most important tools that I can't live without. When you use the sun as backlight, how do you expose properly for your subject? Do you use a reflector? If I can bring a reflector and have an extra helping hand to hold that reflector, that is always ideal to help fill in light and bring up the exposure on your subject. However, a lot of times when you're shooting run and gun as a one-man crew, you don't have that luxury. So what I'll do in those situations is overexpose my sky until my subject is exposed correctly, and I'd say 90% of the footage I shoot into the sun is without a reflector, and it still looks beautiful, so don't feel like you have to have a reflector to get that same look I'm getting. Which computer do you use for editing? I personally have a MacBook Pro and an iMac 5K and an iMac Pro, and they all have the specs maxed out. Obviously, the faster your computer is, the faster you can edit, and therefore the more money you can make, but you can get away with less expensive. I started out with a $1,000 used MacBook and edited my first 50 videos on that. So I'd say just use what you got and work your way up to faster machines for more efficient workflow as you grow. Next question, do you create a storyboard before each shoot? Again, just depends on the shoot. Usually the more pre-planning you have done, the smoother your shoots will go, but sometimes the client is unorganized and you just have to wing it as you go. And I actually talk about that whole storyboarding process in the course while I was working on that TV commercial, and I break down for you the whole pre-production process. But there are other times, like in many of my virtual job shadow videos, that shows me just showing up, shooting as much footage as I can, and then piecing all the story together in the editing room. Next question, if I'm only in high school, will this course still help me? Absolutely. This course is made for all ages. We have as young as 13-year-olds in the course and as old as 65-year-olds in the course. Everyone of every age can get started today applying these teachings. Here's just one of our members who was only 15 years old that recently left a review. He said, "This is honestly one of the best investments that I have ever made. I have had this course for about a week now and I already learned so much. Thank you, Parker. I'm only 15 at the moment and this has helped me so much." And another question I've gotten along these same lines is, how do I get businesses to take me seriously if I'm young? My biggest piece of advice to anyone that is trying to get businesses to take them seriously, especially those who are still in high school, is to get out and create content. Businesses won't care how old you are if your work is amazing. Your work is what's going to get you notice and land you jobs, not your age. So if you're young, start creating content now. And as you put content out there, you'll start getting better and slowly start attracting the eyes of local businesses. Don't feel like you have to have a degree or a certain level of credentials to get hired. In all of my years of doing this job, I've never once had a client ask me where I got my degree or ask for any credentials. All they care about is the work they've seen me do and wanting me to do something just like that for their business. So stop worrying about your age or your credentials and just get out and start creating content. Next question, why do I shoot at higher shutter speeds like at 1/500th or 1/1000th of a second instead of using an ND filter? So this question comes from my how to shoot a wedding video that's on YouTube. I shot at higher shutter speeds in that video and people often ask why. A few reasons. Reason number one, using ND filters isn't super practical when you're shooting run and gun like weddings or events, so you'll end up missing about half the shots if you're fiddling around with ND filters every time the sun goes behind a cloud or you go from shade to sunlight. Reason number two is that I prefer using polarizers to get my colors to pop more, and you can't use a polarizer and an ND filter at the same time. Reason number three is that a lot of my clients ask for stills from the video footage, and I can't really pull stills from the footage if it's shot at 1/50th of a shutter speed. It's just way too blurry. So by shooting at higher shutter speeds, I can also pull perfectly clean stills to be used for my clients as well. Reason number four, I actually prefer less motion blur on certain shoots because it makes my image look crisper and cleaner. I've watched Hollywood movies like the recent Beauty and the Beast that have way too much motion blur on some of their panning shots given their focal length and panning speed, and it almost made me throw up. So motion blur is great, but it can be overused as well. Reason number five, it's a different look and style that I prefer sometimes. I don't do it all the time, but once you understand the rule and why it's there, there are times that I choose to break it. And that goes with any of the rules I've taught today. Rules are made to be broken, but you have to understand them to understand why and when you'd want to break those rules. Next question, do you have any tips for growing a following? Yes, I often post in the Facebook group about my tactics for growing my following and getting views on YouTube, but to give you a few quick tips, number one, content. I know I keep talking about this, but maybe that should tell you how important it is. You have to put out content that people care about. Number two, collaboration. Work with people who have followings like I did with Devin Supertramp. My first 30,000 followers on Instagram came from my association with Devin Graham. And number three, consistency. The more you post, the better, but don't sacrifice quality for quantity. Simply putting out a lot of videos won't work if they aren't very valuable pieces of content. Next question, I can't afford this right now. How can I buy this when I have the money? If you'd like to join at a later time, guys, just shoot me an email at parker@fulltimefilmmaker.com and I'll help you get set up. Or you can visit fulltimefilmmaker.com at any time to sign up on your own. Also, I've had some people ask if the reviews on my website are all real or if I made them all up. I promise you guys they are all real people. I don't have the time to make fake accounts and come up with fake praises for myself all day. I've got better things to do than that. But if you'd like to read more reviews, if you click on the offer link and scroll down, you'll be able to see all the reviews that have been left over the past couple years. And if you have any doubts that they aren't real people, look them up on Facebook, send them a Facebook message, and I'm sure they'll tell you the same thing in private that they did publicly on the website. Speaking of reviews, here's a video review that was sent to me by one of our members just the other day. I always love hearing from you guys and how the course is affecting you. So if you do join, please let me know how you're liking it. It's super important to me that everyone who joins is getting more value out of the course than the money they put into it. So here's JJ from Colorado.
Hey man, my name is JJ Fountain. Just want to let you know, man, your class has been amazing, and it was a pretty big decision for me because I don't have like $600 to just throw away on anything. So I kind of used most of the last of the funds that I had for the gear for my production company I spent on your class. And between the discount of the Adobe Premiere monthly fee and all the wealth of knowledge that you provide, it has been totally worth it, man. It's been a godsend. It's exactly what I needed at the right time that I needed it. It's been a stiff and difficult learning curve, starting a production company and pursuing that dream of mine. But it's been a lot of fun because I love a good challenge and I love learning. And yeah, Full-Time Filmmakers has been huge help. So thank you, man. All your hard work, it does not go unnoticed. So thanks, bud, for everything that you do. There's real people and real faces behind the views on your videos, and I'm one of them. So I just want to encourage you, man, keep up the good work. Yeah, dude, you're awesome.
So anyway, just super cool for me to get responses from all of you guys and see that this course really does help real people pursue their dreams. I'm going to answer just a few more questions and then we'll wrap it up here. What is the best backpack for air travel without breaking rules on weight? I talk about this in my What's in My Bag video in the course, but Ape Case makes an amazing backpack for about $150. It has wheels on the bottom, so it allows you to carry your heavy bags by wheeling it, but it also fits in the overhead compartments and is super deep and super durable and fits a lot of gear. And again, you can check out all these gear recommendations at kit.com/ParkerWalbeck. Next question, if I have specific questions, would I be able to email you those questions? Absolutely. Any questions you have, you will have my personal email address so that you can send me questions and I will usually reply within a day or two. And to me, that's what separates this program from so many other educational options out there, is you have personal access to a practicing professional who can help you overcome your stumbling blocks and shorten your learning curve. And speaking of questions, hopefully I've answered most of yours in this training. If I didn't cover some of your questions, feel free to email me at parker@fulltimefilmmaker.com and I'll try and get around to those as soon as I can. Also, if you have any other questions or doubts about whether this program is right for you, shoot me an email. I'm super accessible, guys. Let's chat about your situation and see what we can do to help. But our offer has officially ended, so procrastinators or all those people who are having payment issues, hit me up at parker@fulltimefilmmaker.com if you still want the discounted price, and we'll get you taken care of. Other than that, I'm out. Thanks for tuning in. You can follow me at Parker Walbeck on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the social medias to keep up to date on what's going on with Full-Time Filmmaker and my filmmaking career. And I want to wish all of you the best of luck in your filmmaking endeavors. Be confident, invest in yourself, fake it till you make it, never stop learning and growing, work harder than everybody else around you, and I promise you will find success. But that's it, I'm out. Thanks for stopping by. If you have any further questions, please let me know.